Is it starting to get cold where you live?
Yeah, but not that fast as I'd prefer. So it's around 5 to 10 degrees Celsius and raining most of time. Prefer freezing and cold weather than this one.
Yes, here it's a little bit below 0 Celsius, so the ice is starting to form on ponds. Oh, you should come live in
Yeah,
Minnesota. It's cold very early.
I suppose you have pretty the same climate here, but well, last years it's a bit warmer than normal.
This year they predict that it'll be cold and lots of snow. So we'll see how it goes. All right, looks like people are coming. I've gotten here from the core meeting, so start up here. All right, for new pull requests, I only saw two new ones, both from me this week. So one is very simple. It's reverting RocksDB parallel compactions to 1 from 2. We changed it a couple of months ago, and well, Igor has actually been documenting some issues that users have been having with RocksDB corruption, and we don't know that this is it, but it's one of the changes that we made. So right now I have it flagged with do not merge, but it might be one of the things that we revert to see if that makes the problem go away.
Mark,
Igor,
I left a comment there. Yeah, so we verified this hypothesis, and looks like reducing this parameter didn't help. So no
okay.
much sense in this part. And regarding the corruption, the candidates is new RocksDB itself, or probably prefetching that it brings.
Okay.
So
So,
we have.
so prob
So there is prefetching implemented in RocksDB itself, but we also wrote a small piece of code to support that. Maybe it's in our part.
okay. So not we don't think it's parallel compactions. We don't think it's the upgrade, and we don't think it's delete range then, right?
Can't say anything about delete range, but that's definitely not parallel compactions and not the upgrade.
I think we only enabled delete range after we did the upgrade. Before that, it was off unless the users all turned it on.
So, well, didn't think about delete range at all for now. So,
Sure. Okay. Well, huh. Not good. Well, I don't know. All right. So speaking of delete range, though, that was the other PR I've got here. It turns out that it's very, very slow. We can talk about it maybe a little bit more later if there's time after we talk about descrub. But the gist of it is that we need to be very, very measured in how we use it. And once we do use it, we should probably start thinking about issuing a memtable flush. We can issue a number of them, I think, before we probably need to flush. But if we have hundreds of these things happening quickly, then it can really, really quickly start making everything very, very slow. So that's basically the high level view of it. Sorry, updated PRs. let's see, this one about replicated write log in RBD. I think that there's still a request for Jason to review that. He had kind of given a general thumbs up about splitting that away from a much bigger PR that they had previously submitted, but no specific review yet, I think. Sage did review this enhanced OSD NUMA Affinity PR with mostly with just some code cleanups and then some questions about how they're doing it and if they need to do it that way. Let's see. Eric's per shard entry count PR during bucket listing. That I don't think it got any real major updates, just rebasing to keep it working. I'm going to try to do some additional testing with that as time permits. Adam's I object is still desperately being worked on. There were some new updates and testing. I think it was not passing Jenkins oddly or something, so he's working on that. And then objection sustained as well. So yeah, Casey, any news on that?
I'm sorry, I tuned out for a second. What were you asking about?
Oh, just I saw Adam's I object. It looks like he's furiously trying to just kind of get the last little bits necessary for it to be merged.
Yeah, as far as I know, it's passing all of the suites, but Jenkins is segfaulting in the linker, so it can't pass make check.
Jeez.
I believe that Jason and David Galloway are helping him look into that.
Good deal. Hopefully soon.
Agreed.
All right. So that's all I've got for updated stuff this week. I've got a couple of things myself in the no movement list that I need to get back to and look at again, but I don't know when I'm going to get to them. So I think that's the case for a lot of folks. But we do have a lot of outstanding performance PRs that we probably need to go back and either get over the fence or clear out at some point here. All right, so any other PRs I missed or anything related to those that we need to talk about? All right, then do we have the guys from Morgan Stanley here?
Yeah, how's it going today?
Good. How are you?
Good. So the issue that we wanted to talk about a little bit is on deep scrubbing. We had an instance a couple days ago where in the morning we came in, there were a large number of deep scrubs going on, in the order of almost 400 going on at once, and it kind of brought our cluster performance to its knees. It caused our RGWs to just be crashing. And in general, we'd just like to get a better handle on how do we get a picture of the deep scrub landscape and how it's scheduled, how we can, I set no deep scrub on the cluster, and it's slowly working off, but 2 days later, there's still like 30-something deep scrubs going on, so it's not like it cleared.
And new ones are still being scheduled.
Yeah, new ones are being scheduled as far as I can tell with no deep scrub on. I mean, it is, looking at the logs, there's almost continual 3 or 4 a minute new PGs scheduled for deep scrubbing. So we're just trying to understand that and thoughts on that.
Was Deep Scrub disabled for a long time or something? And is it the case that you've turned it on recently?
Nope. It's been on. The first time turning it off, it was 2 days ago.
When we had the issue.
Okay. And my second question would be: do you have the scrub sleep set?
It was.
What is your?
It was set. it was not set. It was the default of 0. When the issue happened, searching, I set it to 0.1. So that is its current setting with, and right now the current settings that are not default are the sleep at 0.1, no deep scrub I turned on, and then also to try and affect the scheduling, I set the deep scrub scheduling interval to a month instead of a week. Those are all changes since we had the issue. Before that, everything was vanilla settings.
Okay. And what is the exact version that you're running?
14.2.4.
Okay.
And it's orchestrated with Rook.
Okay. Okay, then that's something we definitely need to investigate, because we haven't heard similar issues in our latest releases. The other issues that we did receive were in earlier releases. We've fixed a bunch of them. I think David, who's also on the call, can speak more about it. David Aviar?
Yeah. Also, OSD Max Scrubs is not been changed.
I didn't change that.
Okay.
Which one is that? That's set to 1. Is that the one that's
yes.
The number of max? Yeah, that's still 1. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm surprised that with no deep scrub set that there'd be anything new getting scheduled.
Yeah, that's what we were most surprised by. We were hoping once we said to no that they would trickle down to 0, but we definitely saw for sure, like say we were at like 1.62, then we definitely saw 63, and we looked in the logs and it actually said a new one was scheduled.
Yeah, yesterday while I was watching in the middle of the day, watching the logs, every minute 2 or 3 finished and 2 or 3 launched, and the day before is when I set no deep scrub.
And it shows on the status.
Yes. The OSDs were not restarted. I did I don't know if that's relevant, but yeah, the status shows the no deep scrub as soon as I put that on.
That's weird.
Okay.
This definitely sounds like a bug, and if you haven't created a tracker yet, let's just create a tracker and mark that as urgent, and we can looking at some of the.
So we've tried that a little bit before. If anybody has any guidance to help us log into the tracking system, the OpenID thwarted our attempts to get an account to put something in the tracker before.
Yeah, at least I got an email saying my account was created for the tracker, but then when I actually tried to log in, I could not get the, whatever that's called, the secondary factor or authentication would not let me in.
Can you send me your email addresses and I can make sure that you have access to the tracker and you can file issues and stuff?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, we can do something like that. We're sending it to Mark, and then he can forward it on if that's cool.
Yeah, cool. Sounds cool.
Sure.
Thank you. We're happy to put stuff in. It's just we tried and failed.
Yeah, we can help you there.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So I guess the question would be, in the meantime, with the bug as it is there any kind of thoughts on? We obviously need to try to avoid this, so our thoughts were like maybe we just write a script that would kind of manually start scheduling these deep scrubs ourselves. We've seen some things online of people doing that. It's not definitely what we'd like to do, but at the same time, obviously, we can't have the cluster go as poorly as it did. So we just want to see, like, do you have any pointers on what to do with that? Like, is the model basically like disable deep scrub and then like schedule them yourself? Or we saw other people say, make the interval very long, like, so long that hopefully it never actually schedules and you schedule them yourself. So we were just trying to get any type of pointers, because basically we wrote a script that was going to do something along the lines of, schedule the oldest 5, but make sure there's no more than, say, 30 deep scrubs happening at a given time, or something like that was our over the whole cluster. I mean, that's what we were thinking about doing, but we're open to any suggestions of what we could do for the time being to avoid cluster chaos.
David, I think you're the best person to answer this question.
Well, I guess I'm wondering, Is there something going on that's making their, like, any one deep scrub taking much longer than before, or loading their cluster? I mean, there are config parameters that they could run only the deep scrubs at night, let's say, or at off hours.
Yeah, I mean, we saw those settings. We don't really have a nice off hours just because, when people aren't here in the day, we have other scripts that are running and actually are a lot of times more demanding on the file system. So the off hours or scheduling it like that, I don't think really fits our use case. I didn't see like any high like OSD loads, if that's what you're talking about, like with causing like longer deep scrubs, or just in general, like how many deep scrubs should be going on before we see performance degradation, like for example in the object store. What's a good guideline for that? We don't even know that.
Right. Well, with OSD max scrubs of 1, you're only getting any one OSD would only be handling one scrub.
Yeah.
Right.
Either as the primary or the replica.
We have 360 OSDs.
Yeah, that's what it tries to do. It's not quite smart enough to limit it to 1. It actually limits it to 2 because it can be participating either as a primary or as a replica. That's one of the to-do items for Octopus that hasn't been done yet.
So I wonder if the quick and dirty way is to just increase the sleep so that that's the easiest thing that you can do. Yeah.
Yep, and let it schedule.
So that's not going to affect how many deep scrubs are going on, but each one will have less of a performance. Is that the idea?
Yes, it's going to be spaced out well so that you don't see impact over your client time.
The sleep that by default is 0 that I set to 0.1. I don't remember the variable. That's the one you're talking about.
Yes.
Is 0.1 sufficient, or should we go higher than 0.1?
You can go higher if you want. If 0.1 is not helping.
It's kind of depends on your environment and how close to your performance saturation or whatever you are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So, I wonder if they have the code that has the warning that will tell them if they're getting way overdue on their scrubs. So, like let's say you set the sleep really high, and it's going to take.
We definitely get plenty of. We get the PGs not deep scrubbed in time.
So you're already getting that.
Yeah, we are getting that.
Yeah, even when it was 0. And sometimes it's quite high, right?
Yeah, I mean it's that kind of migrates around, but we've definitely seen that as high as 2,000 PGs, and in our cluster we have around 11,000 PGs.
So that's not so bad. If you like double the interval, then everything should fall within the target, I guess.
So has something changed recently? I mean, why you didn't upgrade or anything?
No. I mean, when 14.2.4 came out, we upgraded right after that. That's our last change, really.
And it was running with that version probably for how long would you say, a month?
A month without any.
Yeah, without any Ceph changes. And our data flow hasn't really gotten much larger, and and I think when the problem happened, there wasn't an unusual load on the system at that time.
But the no deep scrub flag should cause no new scheduled deep scrubs.
That was intended.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing new ones scheduled.
Yeah.
So. Or new ones started. So is there a nuance difference between a PG scheduled for deep scrub versus it starting?
I don't think so.
No.
Like, I mean, after a PG is deep scrubbed, is it scheduled to be deep scrubbed a week later, or is that a scheduling thing? The deep scrub doesn't happen versus it starting. I don't know.
No, actually, it's sort of a little subtle here. Every time a regular scrub happens, so that's normally daily, it checks to see whether it's been now past the deep scrub interval.
Okay.
So if you set the regular scrub to a month and the deep scrub to a day, and if you inverted that, it would not deep scrub every day. It's only scheduling the regular scrubs. So your regular scrub should always be
less than a deep scrub.
A sub
Okay.
set
Okay.
of the amount of time of a deep
Yeah,
scrub.
and we haven't changed that. I mean, is there thought that we should change that to like 2 days, or is that no? Or
that wouldn't make a difference as far as the flag. So what with the no deep scrub flag set, it's supposed to, so every day it checks, okay, should I run the scrub? And then even though it's been a week or 2 weeks, whatever your setting is, it's supposed to look at the deep scrub flag and the no deep scrub flag and then just say, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to do it anyway.
Oh, okay.
So it would just be doing regular
happening,
scrubs.
So yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We're definitely getting new deep scrubs starting right now, and that deep scrub flag's been set for 2 days.
All right. Yeah, I'll look specifically at the 14.2.4 version and see if something got fixed past that or if something was strange in that version.
That is the latest release, right? As far as we know.
That's what the releases page says, but so probably yes.
So just to reiterate, the recommendation would be instead of doing things manually, turn back on deep scrubbing and just increase the sleep, and then start with 0.1. If we still have issues, just creep that up slowly to see eventually if it helps us.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think that aside from the immediate issue, I think the question in my mind is whether we should change our approach to scheduling scrubs in general, because I think a lot of other users have gone down this road of thinking they need to schedule them themselves.
Yeah, and when we did our Googling research, there was a lot of people with scripts and suggestions, and that's why we kind of started to think going down that path. And believe me, we don't want to do that, but at the same time, we didn't see any other knobs of scheduling and so forth and so forth. So again, that's why we wanted to call here first before we implemented fully a solution.
So the ticket in the card in the backlog was to fix the scheduler so that it gets rid of that minimum of 2, so it's a minimum of 1. It's smarter scheduling so that any OSD is only participating in a single scrub at a time. But I think in reality, what you want is, in order to reduce a visible client impact, you want a subset of the OSDs in the whole cluster to be scrubbing at all, because then most IOs are fast and only you have a tail of small subset of IOs are hitting OSDs that are busy scrubbing, and so the visible impact is lower.
Yeah. We were basically saying when we were thinking about running a script, I mean, basically if there was a way for us to be able to set the max number of deep scrubs total on the cluster, percentage-wise, like you just said, 20%, 30%. If I could set that, then I could basically dial that into where it's acceptable for my cluster. And then that way I have that granularity to say, I never want more than this much of my cluster affected. Something like that, if that was implemented, would do exactly what we were kind of thinking of doing with the script anyway.
Yeah. So we could write a manager module to do that. I think the open question is whether it's going to scale when you have 10,000 OSDs. Or if you'd have to revert back to the other sort of distributed scheduling that we have now. I don't know. I don't have a good intuitive sense. I have a feeling it would just work for most people to do them manually.
Probably, but yeah, don't know.
Well, I appreciate the comments. We'll try some of these.
We're trying the sleeps, and we're trying to report back one way or another if that helps or not. And we will definitely put a ticket in about the deep scrub still being scheduled. We're sending our emails, like you said, and see if we can actually get into the ticket system. That'd be great. And again, we always appreciate the help.
Yep, no problem. Good luck.
Thanks.
All right. Should we move on to delete range?
Yeah.
So the gist of this, or I guess we went over the gist of it before, but the deal here is that when we started defaulting to use this, it doesn't impact us most of the time, but there's one test case that really makes it shows up very easily, which is to create a large number of RGW buckets on one OSD and then promptly delete all of them. And you can trace through the code path to see what that actually ends up doing, but we end up basically just calling delete range a bunch on a small number of OMAP entries. And all of those range tombstones end up fragmenting the mem table really badly. And then a subsequent workload, or even that current workload, will cause a ton of iterator overhead where we are just churning.
I have a feeling that it's even worse than that because the object delete now, when you delete any object with OMAP, uses the delete range at the object store layer. So those are triggering range deletes also. So just creating OMAP objects and deleting them is going to do the same thing.
That's right. And that's the code path that bucket deletion is hitting. It's just deleting the bucket index objects.
Yeah, doing anything special.
For whatever reason, though, that doesn't seem as bad. I wonder if it's because it's triggering flushes more often when you do objects. Maybe there's enough other data that the memtable flush gets triggered, so it doesn't seem as bad. I don't know.
I don't know. I bet if you did like a Brados bench with the OMAP setting and just created a bunch of little OMAP objects and then just looped and deleted them all, you'd see the same thing.
Yeah.
But in any case,
does this reflect just a problem in the trivial problem, or basically a very narrow problem in the design of the mem table, or is it more fundamental?
From the release notes that Mark linked, it sounds like it's a fundamental issue that they kind of consider not important. Basically saying don't use range delete a lot.
Which exactly defeats the So this is really fighting upstream if that's the case. If we can.
Yeah.
I mean, it still makes it makes sense in like the bulk case, right? If you've got like a million keys that you want to delete, and you don't want to call it for every single one, then use the range delete and then flush. But
and it sounds reasonable for log trimming to use this.
In some types of environments and some types of system, the range delete is the most optimal way to delete things.
Like an epsilon tree or whatever.
At all.
Yeah. Right. It's just weird that it's implemented that way. It
Mark,
seems
do
like
we have any data for the larger cases too? Like with that threshold of 1024, is that large enough, or do we have that kind of an idea based on experimentation where the overhead of range delete would be sufficiently small that we should be using it?
Nope, no idea. I took 1024 from the other PR that was previously applied that implemented a threshold. I have no idea where the author got that number from, but I didn't know, Casey didn't know, so we just used it.
Yeah, I mean, it's better than zero, obviously. I just wonder if we have the same exact problem but with the at lower threshold.
Well, I guess the question there is, we probably at some point need something that will issue a flush at some point. Like, don't just wait around letting these pile up. Even the RockCB guys talked about implementing some kind of like automatic flushing behavior if there are enough range tombstones. So they've got the same idea. How many is really a good question, right? And how big you should be. If you've got 1 million keys to delete and you do that over 200 range deletes, then is that the appropriate point to flush? Should you do it sooner and then have multiple flushes? I don't know that there's a clear answer to that. And it probably depends on the underlying hardware and kind of how much CPU you want to burn versus if you want to be in compaction.
So do you have any idea what the flush is actually doing? Is it locking anything that would prevent other RocksDB requests from going through, or would it be safe to kind of run regularly the way that we're talking?
Well, yeah, you're basically so everything that's in the current buffer for the write-ahead log that you're writing into basically gets flushed into level 0, and then you're issuing compaction. So that's why it makes it fast, right? Because now anything new coming in is coming into a new buffer. So you're basically taking what you've got, moving that into a compaction workload, but now you've got a brand new buffer that you get to write into quickly, as long as you don't end up doing the same thing and the same thing over again, and then now you have no more buffers to write into because everything's in compaction, and now you stall, right? Or maybe RocksDB slows you down before you get to that point, but it's
Yeah. So I'm just trying to imagine what this would look like if we wanted to trigger a flush, because it seems like we have to have enough visibility to tell when the last, like how big the current write buffer is, and compare that to the number of range deletes since the last write buffer was started. Do you know if we actually have an API to like check that? Like, can we ask? So every time we do a range delete, we could say, is this the same buffer as the last time? If so, increment the counter. If not, reset it to 0 or to 1. And then if it hits, 20 or however, whatever we decide the magic number is, then force a flush.
so
we need to ask
you could
RocksDB what the current write buffer number is. I guess that's what we need.
yeah. That might be overthinking it though, right? Because I mean that's a nice optimization if you can say, oh, the last 3 range deletes we did landed in this buffer, so now let's reset. But maybe it's not that bad if you've got like a big
every 50th we just flush unconditionally.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. I mean,
yeah, it just means that
if you've
you're
got
always
tons
going to have these flushes that are unnecessary, right? But
that's maybe why we want to set it really high though, the threshold really high, right? Like if you're deleting like 1,000,000 keys, maybe it doesn't matter that much that you're issuing flushes a lot. Maybe you really want to be.
yeah, probably not.
I don't know. Like in the case where you've got like an object that has 20 OMAP entries, we probably don't want to do a delete range on it anyway, right? We probably just want to do
well, I mean,
deletes.
your current pull requests have fixed that, right? So these should become much more rare. As long as the threshold isn't like, whatever the PG log trim increment is +1, or else every PG log trim basically is going to do one of these.
Yeah. I mean, you could even do it time-based, right? Like if you see, well, okay, maybe not.
Yeah,
I was gonna say if you saw, yeah.
Well, maybe my suggestion is to look at the RocksDB API and to see if there's a quick way to get the current number for whatever the thing is that you're writing into, because if so, then it's really straightforward to just count per current write buffer and set the threshold that way. If not, we can just have just a simple cap. But I don't have any intuitive sense for what the number is. Do you? Like, is it after 100 of these, then we should force a flush, or is it after 5,000 of these we should force a flush?
I think it's going to depend on the hardware, but on the new nodes that have Optane drives and really fast NVMEs, it was really quick. Like maybe 200 or 300 of them you want to do a flush, maybe even more, like 100, like maybe even more like 100. But it was not a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Because presumably the iterator basically is doing a order in query. It's looking at all the current range deletes in the buffer to like check, right? So they pile up pretty quick.
And it seems to be pulling it into a standard set, and so we were seeing a lot of allocation and allocator overhead there. But I think that's a dimension that we should, I guess, look at when tuning this.
Makes me think it should do after like 16 of these. We should just. How annoying.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think the approach in your current pull request is going to be a definite win.
And for reference, that's not really mine. That's Aaron 85's. I've just cleaned it up a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, I guess, if we can see this kind of similar behavior in cases where we do delete with larger ranges, like maybe in the resharding bucket case or something, we're deleting a bunch of entries at once. I wonder if we should disable it entirely until we have some time to do some experimentation and really tune it in a way that we're sure works well.
Unfortunately, it sounds kind of true, but I certainly would like to root cause whether there's a tractable path here to get to acceptable or better performance than we had than we previously had, or if it's just running into something deeper. We're adding overhead.
I think for Nautilus, we just have to turn it back off because we're also suspicious about this corruption. That's just a switch. We just only recently turned it on anyway, but in master, I'd be inclined to try to be clever.
Sage, you weren't here for the first part of the conversation, but I think Igor said that the corruption issue predates both us upgrading to RocksDB 6.1.2 and predates the when we switched to two parallel compactions, which I think also means it predates the delete range stuff. But I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay. Was that
we can't
from
hear
the? Oh, he's here. Okay.
So, Mark, not sure I got your sentence properly. I was saying that max parallel compaction doesn't. So we managed to reduce this parameter to 1 and still be able to reproduce the issue. But most probably DB upgrade database. So the root cause most probably is in new RocksDB or maybe in some prefetching stuff or maybe delete range, but I don't know. So it's definitely not parallel compactions and not OSD upgrade. So it happens for fresh Nautilus installation and it happens for max parallel compaction set to 1.
Okay. So in that case, I would say then for Nautilus, we should turn off delete range, which we want to do anyway, I guess, because it's totally poorly performing. But
And is it possible
well, for now, I don't have any evidence of delete range being root cause.
Except that we know it started with .3 and .4. Is that right? Like we haven't seen it earlier than .3.
Well, .3 got plenty of database changes. Is new data RocksDB, prefetching, and delete range, and so it looks rather like some reading issue or things like that. So I don't see any possibility. Well, any big possibility for delete range to impact it somehow, but maybe not. Low chance.
Igor,
go ahead, Neha.
Okay, my question was that, Igor, do you see an issue with reverting the RocksDB version upgrade in Nautilus? Because the dependencies we had were delete range, which we want to turn off anyways. Is there anything else that could go horribly wrong?
I'm not sure about performance. We observed some bad performance for map enumeration in earlier releases. Hopefully this has been fixed with prefetching and new RocksDB. At least I haven't seen any complaints since then. in this performance issue.
Yeah, we need to verify. I mean, occasionally RocksDB actually just can't be downgraded because there's like an on-disk change. Verify that it's. But that would be the most conservative thing to do, right? Would be to revert RocksDB and turn off delete range at the same time.
Yeah.
Sage, one of the reasons we upgraded RocksDB though was to solve other corruption issues that they mentioned.
Those were theoretical, though, right? Weren't they? You had seen that there was a note, and so we wanted to upgrade, but we hadn't actually seen it.
Well, we've seen stuff. I mean, over the last 3 years, people keep talking on the mailing list about random RocksDB corruption issues. It comes up once every 4 or 5 months. Someone has some kind of RocksDB CRC checksum type error in RocksDB, and they've got corruption, and it might be hardware.
Yeah, not as prevalent as this one though. I mean, we have people hitting it multiple times on the same cluster, right? That was never true before.
That was actually related to what I was going to ask Igor, though. We definitely have not seen this on a previous version of RocksDB, the same issue.
So I haven't seen any complaints for this ticket for Nautilus prior to 14.4.3. And this is exactly the version which got new RocksDB.
The upgrade.
Yeah. Yep.
But I can say that we have never seen checksum errors in RocksDB before. Probably happened, but it looked completely different and not that frequent.
And Igor, you were saying that the prefetching, you thought it could also potentially be related?
Yeah, well, actually, I don't have any evidence of this as well. So that's the only part we change from our part. So we have some additional support in BlueFS for prefetching. And well, actually, I can see two branches in RocksDB code which calls checksum verification. The first one is regular reading, and the second one is retrieving data from the prefetched buffer, which actually made me think about prefetching. Actually, right now I provided a small snippet of the code to enhance the login, and hopefully we'll soon see what's the source of the block which is failing. After that, we might definitely say it's prefetching or not.
Have you been able to actually look at the SST file that claims to be corrupted? What the corruption might look like?
Well, actually, I had a couple of snippets from such files, and looks like they are absolutely different from what I expect they should be.
Like total gibberish.
So I can see zeros that dev sets where checksum are expected. So actually, I don't have any explanation for that. And this log snippet I provided will dump the block itself. So
okay.
Let's.
One thing to look out for is if the zeros start at a page boundary. because that's similar to the symptom we saw when like pread was returning growth pages. Simple.
Well, in these SST files that I have, I can see some data portions related to, well, RocksDB block or whatever, which starts at probably page boundaries. But, well, offsets that are reported in logs are completely unaligned with this information in SST file.
Okay.
So it doesn't read, it doesn't complain about reading at offsets at page boundaries. They are not aligned with pages. And actually, so checksum values it's presenting do not correlate with data that located in SST files. So yeah, checksum do not correlate with actual data on SST file. And well, at least I have just a couple of such files, and there are zeros in offsets in SST files, but the retrieved value is definitely not zero. And which is very interesting about the retrieved value, it's always the same for all different for different clusters who are reporting the issue. So I suppose it's well so that doesn't look like reading error. I mean, that doesn't look like a data corruption at persistent storage. It's I don't know. And by the way, we've just got a new ticket. Which has the same root cause with a bit different appearance. Again, assertion in like Qatar, but with a bit different values. I'm verifying it's exactly the same right now.
Mark, what version are we on right now?
6.2.1, if I remember correctly.
Oh,
that's
okay. So we're way back.
Yeah, they made a lot of releases since June. A lot of bug fixes and updates.
I'm just skimming the bug fixes. I'm not seeing anything here about CRC checksum type corruption though.
There, yeah.
But I'm not sure if they would call that out in the notes.
Trying to decide if I thought any of the other things they did mention could be related at all.
Do you know what we had before 621? What we upgraded from?
It was old. It was like 5.18.1 maybe, something like that. It was ways back, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can. Okay, an old email I've got.
I think we are on 6.1.2.
Oh, 6.1.2. Okay, sorry. I had my numbers transposed.
We're on 612, they said.
Yep.
Yeah, not 621, 612. Bug fix is close a redhead log file before another thread deletes it. That's probably important. Let's see. Race condition stuff.
Well, actually, we can probably check if new ProxDB version runs smoothly with current Nautilus, and ask these guys to
try
build and deploy a cluster with
I guess
new.
How easily are they able to reproduce this? Like, what's the occurrence rate?
Well, I think several times a day. You can see that.
Wow. Okay.
And when it happens, maybe one or two times a day, but
that's not bad. And is this on a production cluster with full data?
Can say about all of them, but for at least a couple of them, they are running testing.
Okay. And they're able to reproduce it with their test cluster daily. Yeah. Okay, that's good news.
So, well, actually, they are doing some stress testing, at least one of them. And they have 3 clusters, and 2 of them are impacted by the issue. Okay. Right now, they are reverting back to 14.2.2 and also verifying this patch with enhanced logging.
Okay. And so I would, if they can reproduce it, we can just have them set the arm range thing to false on the off chance that that's related. It seems unlikely, but it's something to try.
Yeah, makes sense. So maybe after getting feedback for current activities, I'll ask them to do.
And we can push a branch easily, just take the Nautilus, whatever, .4, and just put one commit on top that updates RocksDB to the latest also. Try that also. Okay. Okay, well, good news that they can reproduce it. I was worried that this is like random users, once a month at a corruption or something. That would be very challenging.
Igor, is it just one OSD or is it multiple OSDs across their cluster
multiple OSDs.
Okay. What's their workload? Like, what are they doing?
Well, can say about all of them, but some of them are running some stress load. You can check the ticket. I asked about that, but not much feedback on that. But they mentioned some stress loading.
Cool. Okay.
All right. So we only got like a couple minutes left, but the only other thing I had on here was a discussion about number of PGs, and I don't know, maybe that's a bigger discussion than we have for 5 minutes.
Yeah, so I think the thing that I think we need to be careful of is when we have more PGs, it increases the probability that a double OSD or triple OSD failure will lose data. For example, when you have OSDs randomly corrupting themselves because of a RocksDB bug. So in general, I think we want to try to keep the PG count as low as we can, provided it's not, balanced out against other issues, I guess.
How does that? I mean, I know that you'd have potentially more.
You have more triple combinations of OSDs that share data.
Yeah.
So the expected amount of data that you lose is the same.
Yeah.
Because the PGs will be smaller if you have more of them. But the way that, because data is randomly spread across PGs, it isn't so much how much data you lose, it's whether you lose any data, because that tends to sort of lead to a bad day.
Yeah.
Regardless.
You distribute better, so you distribute your failure better, right?
Yeah.
I guess the other thing I was thinking of in terms of where more PGs would have an impact would be more CPU for peering and OSD map handling. Amount of updates for OSD maps.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about the CPU overhead for peering, because the peering doesn't happen that often. And if we adjust the logs so that it's like a total and not a per PG thing, then sort of just divvying them up differently. But
Josh, I will say that I had some tests going where I was actually putting like 7,000 PGs on a particular OSD, and peering didn't seem to really be a problem at all. Memory usage was a huge issue, but or would be normal operation.
And that was a multi-OSD test?
Yeah. And it was that many PGs by accident.
Okay, gotcha.
Having said that, I wasn't looking really closely at it, so it wasn't anything I noticed was real bad. But maybe there'd be a scenario where you could, right? If you had tons and tons of PGs and for some reason things were updating really quickly or something, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's not as much of an issue as I thought then. That's fine. That would be good to hear.
remind me what the particular issue in this case is, why you're reading this up. I'm trying to remember. It was just that you wanted to get a small cluster. You needed more parallelism.
So the very specific reason I brought it up this morning is because there was a QE case where they had 10 pools spread across 80 PGs, and they were trying to expand the amount of space in the cluster, and Backfill was complaining that they didn't have enough space to finish backfill for a particular PG. And I assume it's because they were trying to fill it onto an existing drive that didn't have any space on it or something.
Wasn't there a bug related? I feel like this was actually a bug where it was improperly calculating the anticipated billing or something, because this kept coming up.
The backfill too full, yeah. No, you're talking about the backfill too full issue that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's another thing we should probably check if they are getting those warnings, and they're running 14. What is the version they're running, Mark?
I don't know. Let me see if they said in the bug.
4. So 4 should have that fixed though.
Okay.
But we should double check. So Mark, can you send me a link to the BZ or whatever you're looking at, and I can verify that?
Yeah, absolutely. I will do that when the meeting's over here.
Sure.
Sage, the other thing I was wondering about too, though, is beyond just this particular issue. I wonder if we can avoid having to invoke the PG auto balancer and shrinking the amount of PGs that we have until kind of later on, if we can first change the PG log lengths and have more PGs up front. If that will let us avoid rebalancing and all the backfill work and everything else, if we could start out with more PGs but kind of tweak the PG log lengths on a per pool basis. because that's essentially what the auto balancer really is kind of doing, right? Is you don't have as many PG log entries because you're shrinking the number of PGs. You might only have like 10 in one pool, but you could maybe instead have like 50 to have 1/5 of the PG log entries per PG.
Sorry, I'm trying to follow here. Start over again. You're saying that when we're reducing the number of PGs, we should first increase the PG log length?
No, the other way around. So right now we have like a total of 100 PGs on an OSD, right? So you can very easily end up in a situation where you've got a lot of pools, and the auto tuner is saying, all right, this pool gets 16, this pool gets 8, and this pool gets 4, right?
Hmm.
So what I'm saying is, well, maybe we can start out with a larger pool of PGs to work with if we are willing to change the PG log lengths of the PGs in each pool. If instead of having a stock, instead of saying 3,000 is what everything gets, maybe this pool gets, instead of having the number of PGs shrink in that pool, maybe we say that the PG log length for the PGs in that pool shrinks instead. You still have the same number of entries overall, so it's not like you're shrinking the total number of log entries you've got. You're just distributing them across more PGs instead.
So that the balancer would reduce the memory, but not actually reduce the number of PGs, because you want to have more PGs for parallelism.
For parallelism, and also so that you avoid the backfill workload.
I think I think the PG logs are sort of a red herring. Like, we should, separately from whatever the autoscaler is doing, we should be choosing a PG log length per PG that's a little bit smarter than just a fixed value per PG. I think the real question is, how many PGs should we have? And you don't want a lot of empty PGs. You don't want a lot of PGs for an empty pool unless you need that parallelism for performance. And so you're really basically want to set a floor on the PG count per pool, right? And right now there's just a hard coded value. It's like 4, I think, by default. We could make that 4 or something, or we could ask the user to say, this pool I expect to have high performance, and so therefore I'm going to set a minimum of something. Or we could try to make the cluster try to intelligently choose a minimum based on the size of the cluster. So if there are only 4 OSDs, then there's no reason to have more than 4 PGs.
I guess 100 doesn't give you much to work with, though, right? Like 100 PGs is pretty. If you've got 10 pools or 20 pools, dividing that up in a same way is really tough.
Yeah, I mean, that only really matters when you have a tiny cluster, right? When you have 4 nodes or something. When you have, a 200 OSD cluster, then unless you have thousands of pools, but people don't really have that.
Yeah, I guess maybe the question for me would be, what's our typical deployment size? Is it like 200 OSDs per cluster, or?
I don't know. It's probably above 16. I would say the median is probably around 100. I don't know. We could go look at telemetry and see, but
Sure.
The median size of the median cluster size has Jesus. I'm sorting by the wrong thing. Median cluster is 30 right now. That's using telemetry.
So in reality, you've got a pool of more like 3,000 PGs to 30,000 PGs to work with, right? Oh, you said 30 or you said 30. Sorry,
30.
3,000.
Yeah, well, it's actually 10,000, I guess.
You can go
More
up to
like
300?
or 1,000 rather. You have to divide by 3. Because for every PG, you have multiple copies. That's 1,000.
Sure.
So the median number of PGs is around 1,000. Yeah. But anyway, I guess what I'm getting at is there are cases where a pool is small and it's not performance sensitive, and you really want like 1 PG or 4 PGs or something like that, right? And there are cases where a pool has data that you expect to get reasonable parallelism to. And we can either do 2 things. We can either say that if it's a pool that you want performance on, even though it's small, then you set a minimum on it, a min PG to whatever you want, 130 something, whatever. Or the other way, if it's a pool that you don't expect performance on, then you set the min PG to be a small number and you make the default min PG something larger. I don't really care which one we do. Right now, we're basically defaulting to 4. And so if you need more than that, you're expected to set it higher. But we could flip that around. We could make the min PG value to 64 or 32 or something. 32 is probably sufficient, I would guess, because that'll generally use up to 30 OSDs. That's pretty decent parallelism. And then on the small pool, set the min PG to be something small.
I guess what I don't like is how we have to move data around to make changes, right?
Yeah, that's the name of the game if you want to do it automatically, unless the user tells you what the pool is going to be for. So if we should encourage users to set the target ratio or the target size for the pool, and then we can just start with a number that's reasonable. But if they give you no information, then you have no idea whether it's going to be an empty pool or if it's going to be a big pool.
So I guess my question getting back to PG log length is, does that get you some of the benefit of the auto scaler without needing to move data around? Not all of the benefits, certainly, but does it?
I don't know. It doesn't seem like the memory usage in my mind isn't the big thing, but maybe.
Why do we limit the number of PGs right now?
Because it's all the CPU that you spend processing all the peering messages and the reliability and the probability that you'll have problems. But maybe memory is part of that. I'm not sure.
For me, memory seemed like it was the primary thing that I see, is that the PG log length can get, with lots of PGs, it can get very, very big, the amount of memory we assign to it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking that every time there's like a customer issue where they like just have way too many PGs in their cluster and it like makes things shitty, it's like it's not the memory. It is the memory usage, I guess, at some level, but it's not necessarily the log. It's just like dealing with the past intervals and the peering and like when they get a cluster that's dug into a hole and can't climb out again.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about with the CPU issue. Like, not necessarily every peering time, but when you have tons and tons of PGs to work through everything, it was.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a thundering herd kind of problem.
Yeah, I think you're right. And now I'm not remembering what you mentioned when you first said that.
I think I was just mentioning it as another consideration for like that's why one of the reasons we don't want too many PGs.
Right. Yeah.
Josh, was it like an overall number of PGs, or was it actually like a PG per OSD thing?
Per OSD.
Yeah.
Okay. At small scale, I haven't seen like exactly those kinds of problems with too many PGs per OSD, but that's like with 4 OSDs or something.
Yes.
You know,
that's actually another question I had wanted to bring up as because a lot of those things like with heartbeats and interconnections, so happen more with larger clusters. But with a cluster of like 3, 6, 12 OSDs, does it matter that much that if we have like 300 PGs per OSD or something?
No, not at all. I don't think so. Except every failure is going to lead to data loss, but that's already true on a small cluster. So
yeah, exactly.
I mean, maybe there's like a point at which the total number of OSD or total number of PGs could start kicking stuff in, right? Like maybe if you're talking about less than 30,000 PGs or something, I don't know. Maybe it's not that big of a deal to have more, like significantly more even. I don't know.
Yeah, you mean in terms of like load on the monitor for a larger OSD map, the total number?
Yeah. I mean, like I don't know when the last time I ran one was, but I mean, I've run tests where I've had like 1,000 PGs on an OSD on multi OSD clusters, and this is small scale though. It's like 4 OSDs or 12 OSDs
Sure.
or something, but it works just fine. There's no problem. But I'm not really stressing them in weird ways either, I guess. So, and the memory usage can be high, especially if you've got something that's exercising all of those PGs all at once.
Yeah, you're probably talking about like roughly a gigabyte of memory rather than 100 megabytes at that point, right?
Yeah, depending on what it is and like how big the object names are, that kind of thing.
Yeah. The other aspect of this I wanted to bring up was I think Ben and England had been doing some testing with Autoscaler and seeing some effects on client performance due to look like primarily recovery in his case. But Mark, you had mentioned that you'd in the past run some tests with a single OSD and seen some impact from just plain splitting and merging even with BlueStore.
Yes, absolutely. I'm running with the
Merging is
autoscaler disabled
slow.
right now.
Oh, merging is slow?
Merging has to quiesce I/O to the two PGs that are going to be merged for like a full OSD map epoch cycle, so that they're in a known stable state in order to sandwich them together, and then they get unblocked. That's why the merging goes one PG at a time. So there's only one PG that gets blocked for, I don't know, like 3 seconds or whatever, and then releases.
Okay.
Yep.
I guess how could we mitigate that kind of 3-second block on a single PG? Would help with that kind of case in a small cluster scenario.
Be painfully. The thing about splitting is that you have one PG in exactly one place, and you can just like unzip it and set it apart in an atomic way. But when you put them together, I'm trying to remember what exactly the reason was. You have to have all of the replicas need to be in sync when they zip up, basically. I think that's mainly the reason, because we throw out the PG logs. We can't put the logs together because they have totally disparate version numbers. They might be overlapping and so on. And so we just like basically zero the logs.
Yeah, so we have the QS stage and then the combined stage, right?
Yeah, I have to go back and look at it to remember exactly what would be needed in order to get rid of that. But at the time, it was so much simpler just to pause IO. But this should be very rare, right? It's unusual that you're going to be splitting, because it should only happen if you have a pool that had a lot of data and then you deleted it all, and so the pool's shrinking or the cluster's shrinking or something, like, unless
Merging,
that happened.
not splitting.
Merging. Yeah, sorry. Merging should really never happen.
I'm
not too worried about it.
Doesn't merging happen though when you when any one particular pool has to shrink to make room for another pool that's growing?
They don't make room for each other. They size themselves based on their size relative to the total cluster. So the scaler looks at each pool independently, says how much data is this, what fraction of the total data in the cluster is it, how many PGs that have relative to the total target number of PGs in the cluster. Should I get bigger or smaller? And if it's off by more than 3x, then it will do a bump up or down.
Yeah. Okay.
So it only
So you
happens
start
if
with
you like
small and grow.
overshoot. If you like manually set it really high and you overshoot, then it will scale it down for you. Or if you fill up a pool so that it gets really big and then you delete a bunch of data, and so it has to get really small. But again, it only makes a change if it's off by more than 3x. So you have to make like, quarter the amount of data or whatever before it's really gonna end up doing it.
So if you have one pool that you filled up initially, and then later you go and fill the second pool to like more than 3 times that original pool size, at that point, the first pool gets shrunk, right? Or my understanding?
I believe it's based on the data in the pool compared to the total cluster capacity, not the total cluster size.
Okay, not the total
So
cluster.
if you fill up a quarter of the cluster in one pool, then it'll target basically a quarter of the overall cluster's PGs.
Okay, that makes sense.
And if you were to like fill up a pool to almost the whole capacity, then like delete half the stuff you have and then put it in another pool, you would just end up with more PGs than you otherwise would. It won't like. Okay.
Exactly. Not until you go more than 3x off from where it thinks it should be.
Okay.
But it jumps by powers of 2, and so whatever, there's like some rounding error in there, but roughly speaking, it only makes big changes. So in general, you can end up with like up to like 2 to 3x your target, or a third x your target, or whatever. Makes big changes.
Yeah. And you said that you don't think that the splitting should be nearly as bad as the merging?
Yeah, splitting is super cheap. I mean, it's cheap to do the actual split. There's no pause in IO, but then you have to backfill and move the PG. But in general, there shouldn't be a huge latency gap.
Right.
There's like
I think that's what Ben was saying. He's best, I think, because after he set the sleep settings so there was like a recovery sleep, then it was working better. I think the one thing we did notice from those though was that you were running on AWS, and the disks there, even though they claim to be non-rotational, don't behave the same way as regular physical SSDs that we'd see in a data center. They tend to be a lot more bursty and a lot slower.
Yeah.
So we might need to figure out some way to have better defaults for those.
Yep.
In that kind of environment where you have quotas and throttles, avoiding any kind of data movement might be really beneficial.
I'm not sure if we need to avoid it, but just making it slower so that we don't run into those throttles is helpful.
Well, it's kind of like I don't exactly know how AWS works, but my understanding is that like you kind of like use up your credits and then you regain them slowly over time. So like if you invoke a background workload, all of a sudden you burn through all the credits that you have right now, and then everything else is slow, and then you slowly get it back. But if you have something that you need to do right now, it doesn't help you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. I guess my point is that if we can throttle the background work so it doesn't use up your whole allocation, then better place. Be able to handle data movement.
Sure. I see.
I have to run. I got other stuff to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I think I have two main things. One is that if we want to change the behavior so that instead of setting a high minimum floor for high performance pools, we default to a higher number, and you have to set it lower for a non-performance pool. If we want to make that change, we can do that. I don't really care either way, but people should weigh in. And then the other thing is, if you want to do some smarter PG log length selection based on how many PGs are on the overall OSD and the total budget or something, then I think that's something that might help independent of all this stuff. That's it.
Cool.
All right. See you guys.
Yeah. Have a good day, everyone.